Welcome back to the channel. Today we're going to revisit a video I did last year, and many of you pointed out the awful audio issues, and all the criticism I received from that was well deserved. So we're going to redo that video with a little bit updated information and a little bit better information. So for today's video, we're going to talk about Hyzerflips, flex shots, what they are, the pros and cons of each, and when you should probably use each one. Before we get into the rest of the video, let's really quickly go over what the difference between a Hyzerflip and a flex shot is. A Hyzerflip, also called a turnover, is when you take an understable disc and you throw it on a downward angle. As the disc flies through the air, it's going to flip up to a flat angle or even sometimes drift to the side. The flex shot, sometimes called a force-over, is where you take an overstable disc and throw it on an anhyzer angle. So out of the hand it's already turning, but then the overstability will kick in during the flight and pull it back towards the ground. Oftentimes it'll look much more like an S shape as it's flying. So what are the pros to throwing a Hyzerflip shot? Because you are throwing an understable disc, they tend to have more glide and require less power to get them to go just as far. So if you're really focusing on control, this is an excellent shot to use. So what are the cons of throwing a Hyzerflip shot? Well, for starters, you have to be really familiar with not only how your form works, but how the disc works. You may find some discs are not as understable as you need them to be, or they might be too understable. And a lot of times people have the same disc for many years and beat it into a point where it is actually good for those Hyzerflip shots. But if they end up losing it, then they might not have something to replace it with. Now, because you're also throwing understable discs, they can sometimes be temperamental, where either not enough power or too much power can make the disc fly in a way not intended. Too little and it might be more stable than what you want. Too much and it might not come back or even turn too much. So what are some advantages of throwing the flex shot? Because you're throwing a much more overstable disc, it's easier to trust it and trust that the disc will eventually come out of its flight path. Flex shots are also great for open or windy courses where you need that extra stability to fight through the wind. There's also some cons to throwing the flex shot. Depending on how overstable the disc is, it might actually fight out of its flight much sooner than intended. Depending on how steep or aggressive that anhyzer angle is, will depend on how much room the disc needs to work. The more angle you put on it, often the wider and higher you need to throw it. This isn't always feasible, especially if you play on wooded courses. Knowing when to use each shot is not always easy to figure out, and several factors play an important part, including personal preference, objects in the fairway, wind, and even elevation. Typically, Hyzerflip shots are preferred in the woods because they require less effort, they need less room for the disc to maneuver, and are controllable, which is perfect if you need accuracy over distance. Many older wooded courses were also designed around the Hyzerflip shot before forehands were practical. Flex shots are pretty common on more open courses where it's also windier because the overstability of the disc will fight the wind and there's lots of room for the disc to maneuver and come out of its flight. Now, by no means is anything previously said a hard and fast rule that can't be bent or broken. If you play in the woods, oftentimes you'll find yourself stuck behind several trees where you need to throw a flex shot in order to maneuver around them to get closer to the basket. Or you may find that a Hyzerflip shot is needed on an open hole because you actually need more distance that you can't quite get with a flex shot. Ultimately, what it's going to come down to is what you feel most comfortable throwing in the given present situation. If you found today's video more helpful, be sure to like, comment, subscribe, and stay tuned for more content. Have a good one.